The opinions and statements made by the guests of the Success in Practice podcast are their own, and I do not endorse or accept responsibility for their positions. Any information given by myself or the guests is educational in intention and not to be taken as medical advice. If you choose to act on the content involved in the podcast, you do so at your own risk. Okay, everyone, welcome to another episode of the Success in Practice podcast. Today I'm joined by Jess Harvey. Jess is the owner and operator of Head to Toe Health in Springwood, Queensland. She's a graduate of RMIT's Osteopathy program and has been practicing for 16 years. Jess has continued to grow her skill set by working with Pro Sport Academy, the Australian College of Nutritional and Environmental Medicine, the Bio-Individual Nutrition Institute, and the Burnout Institute. She's a GAPS certified practitioner and also has trained at the Mind Institute. Jess has a special interest in using exercise rehabilitation and functional and integrative medicine principles, including optimal nutrition, sleep hygiene, and stress management to produce greater outcomes. She's also the author of the Burnout Recovery Program, where she helps people look after their physical and emotional health so that they are able to reduce their brain fog, restore their energy, and bring back some vitality into their life. Jess, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Sammy. It's a pleasure to be here.
So today I really want to understand the different facets of your practitioner personality, I guess. No pun intended there, right, with the facets. And the thoughts that formulate in your head, I guess, when you consult and treat. So I want to talk to you about that. But before we get started on that, I want to know about you. I want to know about Jess and I guess a bit about your backstory. And tell us about you growing up and then ultimately what brought you to osteopathy.
Okay, sure. Thank you for that introduction. Appreciate that. So I grew up in a farm, first of all in Western District, Victoria, and then in Northeast Vic. And we grew up on a pretty decent farm. We had cattle and horses and a few other different types of animals. And, I guess my interest for anatomy and physiology was piqued then as a child. Dad would work with the animals. He would do AI on the cattle and breed certain types of cattle. If there was an animal that passed away and he didn't know why, he would go and do a bit of an autopsy on them. So in doing that, he would show me how different things worked.
Just for clarification, AI is not artificial intelligence, it's artificial insemination, is that correct?
That's correct, yes. We're not that well advanced in the country.
We'll keep that, we'll correct that because we're in a new world today, so we're just going to make sure that's right. Continue on.
Yeah, absolutely. No worries. That really got me interested, I think, in anatomy and physiology and how things worked in the body from a very young age. So I was always interested in health and interested in fitness and sport as well. So I ended up at Melbourne Uni studying anatomy, a science degree, anatomy and physiology with my majors. And that's where I found out about osteopathy. So in the town that I lived in, there weren't any osteopaths up until recently, actually. So I had no idea what an osteopath was, hadn't even heard of it. So I moved to Melbourne, found out about osteo, and that was it. I just knew there was, I looked at one website, Mick Kelly's website, and that was the moment that I knew that's where I needed to be. So I finished that degree, I moved into RMIT, and then became a personal trainer to get through, or to help me with my studies through uni, actually, which was a really great suggestion from another one of the students there, because it really helped me set up a greater understanding of biomechanics and also the rehab component, which we didn't cover hugely at uni. So once I finished there, I moved to Queensland for some sun and some warmth, and did a couple of years in 2 different clinics, got some really different experience of how to run clinics, and then went out and opened my own clinic, which I've had now for 14 years. And away I went. So I've always been really interested in education about osteopathy, and also business and health in general, and really, really love educating patients on lifestyle medicine, on biomechanics, on what I call the foundations of health. And, there was a stage a few years in where I just wasn't getting enough change with patients, and I needed that last 10%. I just wasn't getting. And so I went on, a bit of a journey to see what else was out there, and immersed myself in more indirect, first of all, more into the health side of things, so nutritional and environmental medicine, special diets, more rehabilitation exercises, and more specificity around diagnosis and treatment there. So I started there, and then went into more so the indirect techniques, so looking at visceral manipulation, a little bit of craniosacral, those kind of things. So working with the Braille Institute, George Stillian runs some great courses in northern New South Wales. So they were really great. I did a couple of life coaching courses over those years. So looking at different motivation styles, psychosomatics, and how our thoughts can influence our physiology and our pathology in both directions. So using those just to get underneath a little bit more, how it could help to motivate patients, how it could help with accountability, and how it could help with just supporting their mindset around their body and around their health. And I also realised that I just really needed to change. If I was going to work for a long time, my treatment was very physical, lots of heavy massage, manipulation, stretching, MET, those kind of things. I realised that wasn't going to give me longevity in the profession. So that's where, more of that indirect work really helped. And then, great mentorship through pro sport really helped me with another layer of biomechanics and understanding around factors, the neurology around muscle activation, and prediction errors and those kind of things. So it's been an awesome journey so far. I'm still hungry for more, always.
Good. There's a lot there to unpack, and I guess I want to take you back a little bit. Take us back to maybe teenage years, early childhood. Did you play a lot of sport as a younger girl? Like, were you pretty active? Were you very active playing sports and
absolutely,
and so forth?
Yeah, I was really active playing sport. I played a few different sports. So I played cricket and golf mainly, and then I did a bit of volleyball. A bit of table tennis, if that's a sport.
Yeah, definitely.
And so they were the main ones. I, had a few injuries along the way. Went to see some local practitioners, not osteos. Was pretty disappointed, and thought that there was an opening there. There was an avenue that I thought there's potential here. Like, I could do something to really support people in their health a lot more thoroughly than I felt like I was getting supported. So, that may be part of the drive that I have to always push for more results, always push for more knowledge and more skills so that I can, support patients better. Definitely.
Okay, well, let's fast forward a little bit to university years and I guess your experience over at RMIT. Who were some of your influences early on in terms of osteopathy?
Great question. Well, Ray Myers was director of the course at that point. So he had a great influence on the course content. And I went through there in 4 years. So there were a few of us who did first, second year together because of our previous learning. So that was an interesting introduction to the hands-on side of things, walking in first week, probably second day, and talking about FRS left and FRS right when we didn't really have any context of osteopathy, because it was our first week of year one as well. So that was a steep learning curve that I really don't think I caught up with by the end of the 4 years. Palpation-wise, I think I was a long way behind. I know I was. So unfortunately, I don't think I was able to really reap the benefits of having someone like Ray Myers there, and the contribution he made just even at lunchtimes with his craniosacral and biodynamics and his other forms of indirect treatment that he offered at that point, because they just couldn't be part of the curriculum, even back then. So, I mean, but he was amazing. He's an amazing man. So that was really wonderful. But, trying to just grasp.
And you mentioned Mick Kelly's website.
Yeah, so Mick Kelly.
You mentioned earlier about coming across Mick Kelly's website.
Yeah, so he was our teacher for HVLA. So he was a really interesting guy, very experienced and really down to earth in terms of his personally, I think, and also professionally. So I went in to observe him one day, not knowing who he was or how he fit into the landscape of osteopathy. He was just the guy down at the clinic down the road, and ended up in Mick Kelly's office observing him for my first introduction to osteopathy. So that was quite interesting. But yeah, that was great. We had some really great people there. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, right. Okay. And I guess then moving forward, you said that you worked at a couple of clinics when you first graduated. Were there any, practitioners there at that point in your career that I guess maybe helped you or steered you or guided you along?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I worked with John White at OsteoWorks for a couple of years, and he was brilliant in just normalising everything, really. He's beautiful, relaxed man, and he really helped support me in terms of the stress and anxiety and expectations I had around what I was delivering, and some self-doubt around, well, why are they coming to see me when they can come and see John? He's so experienced and he's so good at what he does. And so there was a bit to overcome there, and he had a good grasp on the business side of things. He had a good grasp on the application of techniques and diagnosis as well. So it was a really nice rounded beginning for me as a contractor. So I was able to also test the water in terms of creating my own patient base around, printing out flyers at Officeworks back then. And that was a pretty hard task back then. Even when they're in colour, that was especially unique. So, those kind of things. And I guess that's where I got the grounding for how to, create a business and market and grow a business. Was all kind of just in those early training grounds, in those couple of clinics, and just testing the water there.
Yeah, you don't kind of know it at the time when you're doing it, but they're the things the formative years of what you use later on when you, when you are growing or starting new businesses, you kind of rely on the struggle of those days to kind of make sure that you get through these days, That's one thing that I found. So I want to ask you a couple of questions around that. The first one is that when did you get hooked, Jess? I mean, when did you kind of sit there and listen about or learn about osteopathy? And when was the aha moment for you that made you kind of say, I'm hooked. I'm all in on this. This is like, was that at university? Was it when you were a new graduate? What was that defining moment for you where you said, yeah, this is for me. I'm totally in on this.
Yeah, sure. Great question.
And who delivered that to you? Who was the vessel? Who was the vessel for that?
I would say initially it was that first homepage that I looked at on osteopathy. I can't tell you whose it was. Right. I think it was mixed, and that's why I ended up down there. But it was really how I still describe osteopathy was a holistic approach to the body and finding the cause of the symptoms. So it was leaving no stone unturned and considering all possibilities, moving away from that, what we call now a reductionist form of medicine. And that's really what got me. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really grasp the principles of osteopathy back when we were rote learning them. And I think that has developed over time, and it's still to develop. I think, oh yeah, I understand that one now. But I've said that many a times. over the last 20 years. And I'm sure there's a lot more depth that I'm still to discover within that as well. A lot of the work that I've done with Baral and with George Stillian they would have been the moments that I've gone, this stuff's brilliant.
Right.
Like, this stuff is incredible. And it's usually when we're talking about the link-ups with anatomy and physiology and what we can actually, the amazing things that we can do with our hands. So when it comes to health and supporting people with their health and their wellness, as opposed to just managing their pain, that's when I really go, right, I'm in on that.
Yeah, right.
And also, when we can do those other things, their biomechanics improve. And their pain reduces, So it's, for me, I love to approach the body from what can we do to optimize the health and bring that body into homeostasis. And then the other changes happen from there. So it's like, give the patient what they think they want, but actually give them what they need.
Yeah. You've taken a lesson out of one of my modules.
We're on the same page.
Give them what they want, but deliver what they need.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess, the next question to follow on from that is, as a new graduate, think back to those years, take yourself back. As a new graduate, when you kind of first came out, what were some of the challenges for you? Like, what were some of the anxieties that you had? What were some of the things that you were worried about? What were some of the things that really tested, I guess, your resolve when it came to being a new practitioner?
Definitely the communication piece was challenging. So how do I communicate with a patient? What do I ask them? If they ask me a question and I don't know the answer, what do I say? Being able to think on the spot. And so just a lot of self-doubt, around that. Am I going to be good enough? Am I worthy of them paying the money and spending the time to come and see me? And like I said before, why don't they just go and see John? He's so much more experienced than me. Why would they want to come and see me? And I just came to understand that and really believe that we all have different things to offer. And it may not be, the patient may be benefiting from something different to what we actually think we're giving them. There's so much more to it. And I think we saw that during the COVID years, that a lot of people just wanted to come in and have a chat and have a share and have someone listen to them and have physical touch and have eye contact. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that I was trying to give everything and do everything all at once. But, some things take time. And if a patient is not going to help themselves out with implementing the recommendations that I'm giving them, looking after their health, providing, good, solid, healthy input to their body, they're not going to get the best output. And it's really going to limit my treatment, the ability that I've got to, support their body to change. So it was realising over time and lots of self-doubt that it's not actually about me. I'll do the best that I can and I'll put everything I can on the table, but it's so much contribution from the patient that's required. And that's part of the communication piece. The patient needs to know that it is a team effort. It is not, and how many times we've all heard it, well, I'm here for you to fix me. Just fix it. You know where it is, just fix it. And it's let's work together on that, and being really clear on that from the start.
The idea is that, look, I have a great skill set to be able to do that, but for that skill set to be activated in the best possible way, I need your help as a patient. That's really where that comes from. I think I listened to someone talk about, I guess, what you just mentioned there in terms of a partnership, of the partnership between the patient and the practitioner, really being something that's tantamount to you getting the success that you're after. It's without that partnership, it's really hard to get a result. And that's why it's important that I guess you don't communicate with anxiety, right? And one of the things that produces anxiety is when you focus inwards on how you feel about things. So
Yes.
what I've found with some of the students that I've been working with is when they think about how they are viewed by the patient and by their colleagues, it creates a lot of anxiety. Whereas when they think about the patient, when they actually focus their attention towards the patient, what can I do for the patient? Then they have that focus. And once they have that focus outwards towards the patient, the anxiety goes away. And that comes back, I think, when you speak to a lot of psychologists as well, they'll tell you the same thing. One of the ways they treat anxiety is to not have you focus inwards on the things that make you feel a certain way, but to focus your energy outwards on other people and help other people. That's why I think going and volunteering in the soup kitchen is so powerful. You know, helping people out, they're in need, is so powerful, because it not only is it therapeutic for those people, it's therapeutic for yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we can really only control what we give, right? So to meet the needs of the patient, we need to know what the needs of the patient are and not just assume that. So that's, part of the conversation is why are they here, and not projecting what I think they want onto the whole conversation and focusing on, fulfilling their needs, because that's the part that I can control, is what I give, not what I receive.
Yeah, ultimately, that's right. Yeah, it's what they want, what the patient's after. Tell me about your continued education. You've done a lot of work. You mentioned with Pro Sport Academy. You've done a lot of work with Baral. You've done a lot of work with George Stillian. You also have this good knowledge with integrative and functional medicine, which I'm interested in too. So I want to know about that. Tell me how you got into, tell me about your experience. Start with maybe Pro Sport, and tell us about some of the continued education that you've done and what you found was really beneficial from that.
Yeah, from Pro Sport in particular, just going back to looking at the neurology, muscle activation, the prediction errors that can happen, and how the neurology can become dysfunctional, and then how to reset that. So it was quite a bit of revision back from uni, which was really interesting for me to cover again, much like the physiology that I have learnt over the last decade in the context of what I'm actually doing, because I could understand the context of it, and I've seen patients with, certain types of dysfunctions, dis-ease and diseases. It helps me assimilate that information a whole lot easier, and drawing those connections between, Pro Sport coming from a physiotherapy perspective, and the nutritional and environmental medicine coming from more of a naturopathic perspective, and how to integrate those into osteopathic principles, and also my delivery of osteopathy, which is I love to do hands-on work. And I love to spend, a good amount of time with patients as well and have a conversation with them. So it's incorporating all of those things and then creating my own, like everyone has their own individual approach. Just solidifying down into what those consistent things are that I can deliver for patients, and putting it together.
Yeah, look, I think it's especially on the functional medicine, environmental medicine, nutritional medicine, on that side of things. If osteopathy were to grow really as a profession here, I'd love for it to go down that pathway. I think it's another systems approach that we're probably missing, in terms of, like, we're very good with biomechanics and with physiology and movement. We're great with movement, but understanding, I guess, the internal workings of the body, and how diet affects that, how the environment affects that, the toxicity and all that kind of stuff, and how to help the body heal from that stuff. I mean, that's a new branch, and fits so well in with osteopathic philosophy and principles that I'd love to see more of that integrated into our education. But I guess that's probably for another episode with you and me, Jess.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I look at Dr. Brand. He's considered the father of functional medicine, and he thinks like an osteopath, really. And I think a lot of the naturopathic philosophy is very similar to osteopathic philosophy. And I've seen Dr. Still's writings about how we have all the pharmacy that we need inside our bodies. We can create everything, every medication or medicine, so to speak,
and in nature as well, and in nature.
Absolutely, yeah.
Nature's so powerful. Yeah,
and I think
definitely.
I think we are. Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead. Continue.
Yeah, I think there's just so much more that we can add to the patient management piece that would make a massive difference to how well accepted the osteopathic techniques are and the osteopathic management is if we added the lifestyle medicine to it. I just think those two together can just be absolute dynamite for the body in returning to homeostasis and optimizing people's healing capacity.
Definitely, couldn't agree more with that. And I guess, like I said, it's a new frontier, but it's something that can be really integrated well into osteopathic practice because it just the principles of it make sense. Like it just makes sense, and it's almost ridiculous that it's not part of our education to start with.
Absolutely.
So I want to ask you about
nothing much changes in it, Sammy. Like nothing much changes because it all goes back to the basics. There's not a lot of evolution in those foundations of health.
No, there's nothing new under the sun. I mean, if you're a GP who practices integrative medicine, you're trying to bring balance and homeostasis back to any system that you're working with. And if that's not osteopathic principles, I don't know what is. Right. So, and so I guess any practitioner, whether they're a surgeon, a GP, a physiotherapist, if they're thinking along those lines and I'm trying to bring balance to the system, then, you're on the right track there in terms of osteopathy. And one of my pet peeves is when they come up with these new ideas that sound like osteopathy and they don't credit osteopathy. Like, it's like, hey, we think that, if, massaging breast tissue is or the one that came out about breastfeeding and how this was a long time ago. It came out that breastfeeding reduces the incidence of breast cancer. Every osteopath must have looked up in the sky and said, oh really?
About time.
We've been saying this for the last 50 years. About bloody time.
Absolutely.
and so it just makes sense, right? And so things like that we've been saying for a long time, and the evidence is catching up to us. There's a lot of that stuff going along, and I guess, like I said, there's so much there we can talk about, but I don't want to get too off topic with what I'm trying to discuss with you. But that's something that I get asked about a lot, and I talk about a lot, and I think that ultimately, I think evidence is going to catch up to what we're saying. And we're not always right. I don't want to get on a high horse. We're not always right about everything, but the philosophy, when applied properly, is on the right path. If we get it wrong, it's us that are getting it wrong. It's not the philosophy. But it's like, we don't want to straw man the principles. I want to ask you, Jess, about your ideas on, because you have a strong biomechanical background. You practice, I guess, rehabilitation and exercise prescription. That's involved in your practice, your daily practice. Excuse me. You mentioned earlier that you didn't get a lot of that at RMIT when you were a student. There wasn't a real slant or a particular osteopathic application to rehabilitation and exercise. Tell us your thoughts on that, because my thoughts are that we haven't really developed our own idea of what rehabilitation should look like. I think we're just copying and pasting from strength and conditioning or physiotherapy or exercise physiology, and I don't think that's to our benefit. So what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on rehabilitation, osteopathy, and how we can move forward in making sure that what we do there is in line with our principles?
Well, so Paul Herman came in and did our rehabilitation training at RMIT, and he was amazing, and he does great work still now, but I just don't think he got enough airtime. It just wasn't enough time to really integrate what was going on. because I had the background as a personal trainer, I was practicing it most days with clients. I was practicing myself in the gym. I was rehab. I, had a history rehabbing a shoulder myself since I was 14 into the years that I was at uni. So I had an extra interest in rehabilitation anyway. But I was so grateful that I had that background, because there weren't many people that were grasping what was going on in those rehabilitation classes, just because of how much information was brought into such a small time frame. So for me, we were told back at uni that we would have, to paraphrase, it was like, well, only 5% of people might follow your advice. It's probably even more so like 95% of people won't follow your advice. So, how much time do you want to put into it?
Yeah.
And right at that moment, I just went, no, not me. More people, I'm going to have the opposite. I'm going to have much more compliance than that. And I've worked really hard in putting systems in place to ensure that accountability and that compliance to the recommendations that I put in place. It's not where I'd like it to be, but I'm constantly working on it. So for me, we can do a certain amount in half an hour or 40 minutes or an hour in a week or a month or a quarter. It's what the patient's doing at home that's so important. What are the postures that they're actually living in? They're so important. And I think part of the rehabilitation piece is education as well. The patients are learning how their body responds. They learn that if they do a certain exercise, they feel better, they can sit up straighter at the desk, they can breathe better, they can think clearer. So they're getting a whole lot more education and a whole lot more understanding of their body. They're more in their body and looking for what's working for them. But I think just in terms of stability, in terms of mobility as well, in terms of lubrication and quality of movement, that's where I use the exercises and the programs. More recently I've been putting more into actual organ movement, exercises that mobilize through the organs. Like Dr. Eric Franklin is amazing at what he's done in terms of movement, movement strategies. He used to teach dancing predominantly, and now he's teaching different forms of Pilates and his Franklin method. And I find that extremely helpful in terms of helping with fascial glide in between the organs and helping with the interface between restrictions in the organs and how that affects the musculoskeletal system. So, it complements really well Baral's work. So it's a really nice way to follow up. I can work on some kidney or liver issue or fascia, ligaments around those areas, and then I can follow up with the patient, giving the patient specific exercises to help with mobilizing those areas. And so I feel like that just prolongs the treatment. It educates the patient, it gets them moving, and all the other benefits that we get with exercise as well. Also, they're spending some time actually working on themselves.
Yeah, definitely. I tend to agree with everything you said there in terms of, the being involved in the movement, right? In being in your own body, especially away from the clinic, where you're spending, 16 hours of the day. Whether it's your work, your house, your home, and the exercise that you do and the sports that you play, and being kind of in your own body and understanding what your body's doing. When we look at trying to formulate how we deliver rehabilitation to our students and to osteopaths, especially university level, do you think we can be doing a better job in terms of, what you discussed then in terms of the fascial movement and the organ movement, I think that stuff will come as continued education and learning. But in terms of the basics, how do you see the body from a rehabilitation point of view with regards to the principles and the osteopathic principles that you apply? For example, are you breaking the body down to body parts? Are you looking at individual joints and, say if you have if you have a certain muscle that's active or not active, or the glutes are firing or that's not firing, and you've got to get this firing. And are we going down that path in terms of segmentalizing the body, or is it better that we continue to look at it from a holistic perspective and then apply rehabilitation that way?
Great question. The answer is it depends. Depends on the patient, I think. I look at all those things probably more like the ladder that you mentioned there, that really for me it's a bit like a Venn diagram. There's overlapping pieces and they all come together in the middle. So if I see through assessment, we go, okay, glute medius, maybe it's not activating as well as it could be. Why isn't it activating well enough? Because if I just go and give some clams, it's probably not going to change the neurology. We might activate the muscle, but we're probably not dealing with why the muscle's not activating in the first place. Is it an issue with the antagonist-agonist relationship? Is it an issue with a direct mechanical or chemical issue on the nerve? Is it a compensatory change for something that's going on in the pelvis, musculoskeletally, or through, let's say, the cecum or the sigmoid? Is it a response to some of those things? There's so many different avenues that we can go down. And for me, that's just really being specific with diagnosis. And the more I've gone on in osteopathy, the more the longer I take, and the more specific I am with the physical diagnosis. Not so much with what the patient says. I sit that in the back of my mind. J.P. Barral, he says, the patient lies, the practitioner lies, only the body tells the truth. So the assessment piece I'm so specific on. And then I try and work out the story around the patient's information that they've given me, and the experience and the projection that I put on that as well. And trying to look at the overlap of that and where can we go to make the biggest change. What are the 1 or 2 exercises that I can provide that are going to give the patient quick wins? They're going to feel a difference, and it's going to make the most significant difference to the long-term change. And it's practical for their life as well. It's understanding what their commitment level is, what their lifestyle is like, and practically, if they're not going to do 2 exercises twice a day, do I just give them 1 to do once a day? When we start there and we start small, and just keep talking to them over the phone or email. Let me know when you've done 6 days of this. So it's really different for each patient. So sometimes it will be a very localized response. Let's just do some VMO exercises. Let's just do some quad activations or some hamstring activations. And other times it's let's go into more of a functional movement, like simulating the lifting that you're doing at work, or simulating the rotation that you're doing at work. It really depends on the patient and where they're at and what they need, rather, as opposed to what they want. Most people, if they're working, they need to be able to do their job for an income, etc., etc. They want to be able to play golf, but let's get them working first. Let's get them working comfortably. Let's get them doing that in a safe way, and then let's look at the golf side of things or the other activities that they like to do. It's looking at that hierarchy, because I might want to get them back to everything, which is probably impractical, and they really love golf, but really what they need for their mental health and their family situation and their income and security and to be able to sleep at night is to get back to work.
Yeah, correct. Hello everyone, I'd like to take a quick moment to thank everyone for watching and listening to the podcast. If you have received value from this episode, the kindest thing you can do for me is to like, share, follow and subscribe to the channel on whichever platform that you are listening on. If any of the conversations have resonated with you and you feel that I can help elevate your practice, you can find me at successinpractice.net. That is, the Success in Practice program can be found at successinpractice.net. The Success in Practice program is the signature program that takes a practitioner who may be struggling with retaining patients. They may not be certain about building effective treatment strategies, and they may feel somewhat anxious and doubtful about what they are going to do with a patient. And they are not really accelerating in the real world of private practice. It takes this practitioner and it turns their careers right around to the point where the patients have an effective diagnosis and a real treatment plan that they can take home. Patients are happy to book in multiple sessions with you and they are confident about your abilities. And more importantly, you now have direction and are confident about your own abilities. The program streamlines how you operate as a practitioner. Guys, you should have been taught this at university, but you weren't. You may have been practicing for the last few years thinking there has to be a better way. There has to be a more effective way of engaging with patients and getting them results. Well, there is. And this is what the program delivers. Go to successinpractice.net and check out the options available to you. See where I can help you easily grow your patient list and finally earn the rewarding income that you deserve. For all the information on how you can reach me personally, check out the show notes. Also in the show notes, you'll find a link to the chat transcripts from these podcasts. These are valuable and a wealth of information. I really hope that you're enjoying the podcast. Guys, leave a comment if there's any questions on this episode. And please, don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe to the channel. Now, back to the show. All right, Jess, so moving forward, I guess I want to ask you about what you're doing now. You've authored the Burnout Recovery Program. Tell us about that and what you're doing with that, and I guess what you want to do with that. What are you trying to achieve there?
Yeah, sure. So it's an online 12-week program where I deliver educational content and coaching sessions as well, specifically to stressed, exhausted, and burnt out women over.
Jess, before you go on, can I get you to move the screen a little bit? You're kind of not in. I don't know if you can see yourself, but
you're right there.
Move the screen over a bit more.
Bit more.
Yeah, that's better. Now different picture. A little bit. Yeah, further? A little bit more in the same way that you moved it, just a little bit.
Yep.
That's better. Now you're in the middle.
We good?
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, cool. That's better now. All right. So, Jess, tell me about the Burnout Recovery Program that you're doing now. Why have you set that up, and what do you hope to achieve with it?
Yeah, so I think what I see is there's a huge piece missing in the health and wellness landscape, which is just that base level of health principles being fulfilled. So I call them pillars or foundations. You know, it's things like appropriate movement for the person at the appropriate time. It's getting sleep dialed in. It's proper nutrition. It's getting enough water in. Good relationships. It is getting out in the sunshine, grounding, great breathing, breathing mechanics and getting oxygenation, good blood gas balance as well. So they're the kind of things that I love educating patients on. And I feel that I know that when patients, they love this stuff and they really embrace it, is my experience. And when they do, these are the people that get the most change in life and also in, the results from the osteopathic approach that I'm taking with them. And also, potentially other practitioners as well. Maybe they're seeing a naturopath or an acupuncturist. So for me, the education around that foundation, those foundational aspects of health is hugely important. So back a few years ago, I went through a very significant time frame of burnout, and I came out, not quite out at that point, but I really reassessed what my skill set was. I really reassessed what I loved about osteopathy, what I loved about health, what my values were as well. I'd looked at values in the past, but it wasn't until I really got into that situation where I really had to dig deeper and really pull those things apart. And what came together was I just love education, and I want to be able to support and impact more people in the world. And in an osteopathic model, the way that I like to treat, which is hands-on, I'm limited by the one-to-one model. I'm limited by time, and I'm limited by geography as well. So that's where I went, and a few things came together, and I thought, okay, well, I could go online and I could use my love of education and my knowledge around all those components of lifestyle medicine that I've learned through ACNM and GAPS and bio-individual nutrition and those kind of places, and put those into place. There's so much information out there on all different aspects of health. There's so much noise in what to do, but it's really about implementing that knowledge. There's knowledge is power, but only when it's implemented. So how can I support people to implement the information into their lives and really be accountable? And that was by, creating this course and helping in that way. I love creating content and getting content out there, but, it becomes education and just becomes more information unless we can actually get people, actually applying it. And so that's where the coaching comes into place. I feel like I'm bringing a whole lot of my skill set, including my osteopathic principles, which feed in really well to the whole system also. So by doing that, I'm also creating, there's better results coming through for my patients as well.
Right. Have any of your colleagues or people, osteopaths, other osteopaths that you know, seeing that you're in that space, has anybody kind of contacted you with their own burnout experiences? Like, is that, I know that it's a common thing that we discuss in the profession about not over treating, but just burnout, because it's tough on our bodies. It's hard work. It's not light work. Have you consulted with other osteopaths, I guess, in this field? Do you know the landscape at all?
Yeah, so across a whole lot of different fields and even outside of healthcare, I've spoken to a lot of people, patients as well, from all different industries, and not even just in a professional environment or a corporate environment, but also in the home environment as well, in terms of compassion and carers fatigue that's happening in this sandwich generation, where we've got people who are 40, 50, 60 years old, and they're sandwiched in between two generations. They're looking after young children, and they're also looking after aging parents who are needing more and more support all the time. So burnout is well studied, even though it's still, not technically on the DSM. It's becoming more well known as a word, even though maybe the definitions are quite variable across different people. But it's starting to get out there a lot more. Very well studied in the workplace, but very, very understudied or poorly studied outside of the workplace. And with women mostly affected in workplaces like mostly medical and emergency rooms that it's studied in, especially during COVID. I think that was a great testing ground for how burnout manifests, how compassion fatigue manifests around those predisposing factors in workplaces and burnout. So that brought a lot more in, but it's really a silent space in terms of people who are caring for kids or elderly parents or outside those bigger medical operations. Yeah.
In terms of the osteopathy and osteopaths, why do you think, what's the reason behind, I guess, why osteopaths might feel burnout? Can you shed some light on that? I know that we're not any different. We're not aliens from another planet. And so we tend to share, obviously, the same reasons as to why a general population might feel burnout. But specifically to do with osteopathy, what do you think are some of the factors that contribute uniquely to our profession?
I think the main thing is that we actually really care. Osteopaths generally really care about their patients. They really care about the results that the patients get. And we don't always get the results that we want. And there's so many other factors around that, in terms of a patient's world, that can contribute to that. So I think there's that piece, there's that perfectionist piece. I know I've certainly got a lot of that on board. But there's also that compassion fatigue that can happen, that can feed into burnout. There's a work-life balance too, and I think a lot of us over-deliver as osteopaths. So our work-life balance is out, and we often, it's like a sympathetic-parasympathetic dominance. We just spend too much time in sympathetic. We spend too much time in work mode, in go-go mode, rather than actually in being mode and rest and recovery and that enjoyment piece. I love my work, but that is partly what got me contributed to my burnout. So there's those few things. The kind of part of the predisposing factors or the character traits that can lead into burnout are things like perfectionism. Often it happens in carers. There's also potentially work issues with work dynamics and not feeling appreciated in the workplace. We see with a lot of surveys now with the newer generation coming through that appreciation is really huge for them. For a lot of them in the surveys, a lot more important than remuneration. So I do wonder what kind of risk that these younger generations coming through are at because of that. And I wonder if their workplaces in healthcare, especially in private practice, are keeping at pace with that as well. And really looking at, one of the things I work on with my grads is making sure that they do have work-life balance and making sure that they do have a good balance even within their work of patient management, treatment time, and also the background in terms of their education, their CPD, their own research in the context of the patient conditions they're seeing, and just making sure that they've got enough support in that avenue. And even in their orientation, I'm getting really clear on what their signs of overwhelm are, and so that we can nip that in the bud straight away before they get to the point of burnout. Another thing is getting really clear on the expectations and being open about that all the way along. Are expectations being met on both sides? Because that's one of the other factors that can feed into burnout as well. And stress, managing stress is absolutely huge. And there's so many different ways to do that. Everyone does it differently. There's certain things that we know support the stress response, and so much of that is mindset, perception about, is it a distress or is it a eustress? Is it a stress that's going to support the body to grow and adapt and change? Is it a challenge and an opportunity? Or is it a distress, which is actually going to wind the nervous system up even more and cause degeneration of the tissue and take it out of homeostasis even further? And that's the thing around perception.
Go ahead.
That's the thing around perception.
No, go ahead.
No event is good or bad unless we name it to be that, unless we label it good or bad. So addressing perception to an event and looking at the drawbacks and the benefits and being able to look at those objectively and balance those out is really important into how much threat our body perceives and what kind of stress response that comes out of that.
Yeah. And in terms of, I guess, the other thing I wanted to ask you, especially with some of the, I guess, recent practitioners or new graduates or early career practitioners, having fulfillment in your work and actually doing something that you love and seeing the results, the fruits of that, I think that goes a long way in making sure that you don't get burnt out and that you don't feel overwhelmed. And I guess by maybe taking the capital O out of osteopathy for what we're delivering to people these days is partly why people feel like, burnout it's not a direct line. It's not a linear thing. It's something that takes you from here to there to there. You kind of go sideways a little bit and then sideways the other way, and then you go up and down, and then you have a great couple of months, and then the next 3 months are really awful, and then you find yourself in a place where you're just overwhelmed and burnt out. And so I guess when you have some of that stability in osteopathy in terms of practicing, going back to your principles, understanding what you're doing diagnostically and from a treatment perspective, and having that underpinning what you do gives you a sense of stability. And I guess if you don't have that, your path towards burnout might be a little bit quicker, or overwhelm might be a little bit quicker. Is that something you found in your experience, especially with dealing with, I guess you've been practicing for 16 years and you've seen a whole list of people that have come through, and do you find that as the years go on, the lack of, I guess, foundations and principles, has that played a part in getting people to an area of overwhelm quicker?
Yeah, look, I think you mentioned a whole lot of different things there, Sammy, to unpack. It's interesting you mentioned fulfillment, because I think that's really important, and that's that feeling of feeling that we're contributing and we're doing something positive. And fulfillment in that role, for me, contribution's my highest value, and osteopathy is one of the ways I do that. And I think the difficulty comes when there is, especially initially, we come out of uni, we're still trying to work it out. Like, does this work? Like, how does it work? How well does it work? And getting an idea of what works with different groups of patients and different types of patients. And there's just a trust. I think once we trust osteopathy and we trust in our ability to deliver change and to support the patient's body to change and to restore homeostasis and optimal healing capacity, then that's when we don't need the extra communication to come back. Because as we all know, we see a patient for a little while, sometimes they disappear, and they might come back 2 years later and go, oh, I moved. I've been amazing since I saw you last, but I just wanted you to come in and check something, or now I've just sprained something, and just go, wow, like I thought that they weren't happy and they just never came back. So it's that internal trust and that internal knowing, I think, that we are making our own contribution in whatever way that is, rather than needing that feedback from the patient and needing that acknowledgement from the patient.
Yeah, the validation.
That assurance that, oh, I feel so much better, you did this and you did that. Well, we know we don't actually do it, right? We just give the body a little nudge. I think that's one of the difficulties early on, is being attached to the outcome, not attached to what we're actually providing, because that's the only thing we can control.
Yeah, great advice. That's awesome. Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. I think once you have a trust in osteopathy and you let that be the measuring stick, you then don't need validation. And the problem with validation is that it's a roller coaster, right? Like, sometimes the patient will tell you how wonderful you are, and if you listen to that, you'll believe that. And then one day a patient will come and tell you, I'm worse. I saw you and the pain down my leg got worse after I saw you. Well, if you believe the patient that told you did great work, you're going to believe the patient that told you that you made them worse.
Absolutely.
Now, if you let yourself go on that roller coaster ride, it's not going to end well. It's going to end in overwhelm and burnout and stress. And I guess you have to let osteopathy be your stabilizer. I guess that's my view on that. It's got to really keep you level-headed and thinking along that path of homeostasis, trying to bring balance, and the fact that you're doing your best to let that be the guiding light, I guess, in what you do. And if you do that, I think that contributes to at least not feeling overwhelm and anxiety. I'm sure there's a lot of factors to it, but that's, I think, one major factor to, especially early on in your career. So I guess that leads me on then to my next question that I want to discuss with you. You've been an osteopath for 16 years. You've seen some of the development in that time. Let's talk about osteopathy and where it is currently in terms of the landscape of what's going on and what's happening, I guess, across the country, and in terms of regulation, education. I know that you're currently looking at kind of reducing what you're doing in terms of, running the business side of things and being responsible for, I guess, livelihoods of other people. There's so much pressure at the moment financially on practices, on business owners, and there's a high demand for wages from, I guess, either contractors or employees. And that's creating a lot of stress and anxiety out there for people. How do we deal with that as osteopaths? Where do you think we're going? Do you think we're heading into these large, big clinics where people are just on employment? Like, I know physiotherapists now are largely employed. I don't know of any physiotherapists who are contractors anymore. Largely they're on either salaries that are either very small or very big, depending on their skill set. Do you think we're heading that way? as osteopaths?
Hello everyone, just a quick break to give you some information on where to best find me. The first place is the private Facebook group called the Successful Practitioner Pathway. I've set up this private group as a place where practitioners can go and get tips and advice on how to best accelerate their practice and improve their clinical practice skills. The second place to find me is at successinpractice.net. That is where the Success in Practice signature program is housed. You can find more information about me and how I can best help you achieve success in your practice. So, the two best places, the private Facebook group, the Successful Practitioner Pathway, and successinpractice.net. I will link to both those places in the show notes, so for more information, please see the show notes. Now, enjoy and back to the show.
It's a great question. I think it's an unknown, and I've swum around in the contractor versus employee situation for quite a number of years, and it's still a hot topic for discussion whenever I get together with other osteopaths as to how all the different models work. And there are so many different models, and there's so many different combinations out there, probably as many different combinations as there are clinics. And I think it's a really tough question because our model as osteopaths, our treatment model is so different to other modalities. So, we just can't overlay a carbon copy of what's going on in other industries. And I wouldn't want to either. I'd love to keep osteopathy separate and unique. But yes, definitely, I think we've seen across all industries, I think, a really tough time this calendar year. And I don't think that's going away soon. I'm happy to be wrong. And I think riding the wave is the best approach. And, Dr. John Demartini talks about providing value. If you're providing a service that is filling a void for someone or a population of people, you will always have enough business. So it's filling the needs of the patient. It's working out what the needs are of those patients, getting really specific on the kinds of patients that you want to see. And that becomes your intention. That becomes what you draw in through your intention and what you put out into the world, but also practically in your advertising, in the theming of your website, in the theming of your documentation and any public materials that you put out there, including social media and all those kind of things. Having consistent messaging around what problem you're trying to solve for people is really important. And, moving up to Queensland, nearly 2 decades ago, osteopathy has grown so much here. There's still not a lot of osteopaths in Queensland. There's a lot more than there used to be when I first moved up. So the growth of osteopathy I feel like it's been exponential. So we have a great opportunity to continue to educate people on what osteopathy is. A lot of people still aren't clear. A lot of GPs are referring to us through CDM programs that actually don't know what we do. So there is so much opportunity in educating the public and the medical industry as to what we do, and also allied health, personal trainers, across the whole board of healthcare. And that will open up a lot of avenues, I think, as well. And just having relationships with other practitioners and other business owners, and discussing challenges and sharing wisdom and advice on how we're navigating that. I know for me personally, I either needed to grow and employ or get more contractors on board, and I've got a mixed model of employment and contractors. So I either had to get more people on the ground or scale back. And I know currently what I'm absolutely get up every day for is to support my patients and clients. And while I've absolutely loved training new graduates and really helping leapfrog that first 5 to 10 years in practice and really accelerate them through that and all the awkwardness that brings, I've loved that side of things, and I've built a whole program around that. But what I really want to do is really educate patients and clients right now. So for me, that was a clear decision for me to scale down the clinic. I still love being an osteopath, and I hope I always will, because it's just, yeah, it's an ever growing, I guess it's an eternal learning experience, right? And we can just go down so many rabbit holes in osteopathy, and also then bringing in, aspects of other modalities and other theories as well. Like, traditional Chinese medicine, homeopathy, naturopathy. I think they all really line up really well with what we're trying to do with osteopathy. So I think, more communication between osteopaths. I think there's some great business pages out there, that there's some really interesting conversation and some really great collaboration that happens in those groups. And I think, I just hope that continues and we just keep supporting each other, because we're all in the end trying to do the same thing, right? We're all trying to reach more patients.
Yeah, definitely. I guess then you mentioned that you run a mixed model of contractor and employee, and you've had the privilege of helping your own graduates kind of come into practice and learn and grow. How have you found, you've been doing it for 16 years, how have you found the evolution of the new graduate? Like, what are they better at now, and what are they not as good at now? Where do you think the gaps need to be filled? Like, what's going on there? We'll talk about university education in a minute, but there's no point kind of like, I find there's no point, like arguing or discussing something that can't be changed, straight away. And in terms of education, it's something that you can't change straight away. You've got to go through accreditation boards and councils and stuff like that. But as a profession, as a association of professionals, we have an opportunity to, I guess, fill the gap for people that come out. Where do you think those gaps are? What do you think new graduates are missing out on that they could really do, get help with, and then, have that process of transitioning from a student to a practitioner become much easier?
I think one of the main aspects for me that I've found is the communication piece. So I think just understanding how to really communicate with a patient, how to extract the information that we need out of the patient in a really succinct way. And that information being like I said before, what are their needs and what are their wants? What's the main thing that's causing their problem that needs to change for them to continue treatment? Because if we can't keep seeing them, we can't support them to a point. We've got to see them to help them. So they've got to have those quick wins to be able to get the buy-in to actually come back so that we can continue to support them. Obviously, without over-treating. So for me, it's being able to communicate that, being able to understand what their motivation style is. How do we actually communicate to that patient to help with their accountability and to help with their motivation, so that they don't need external input all the time. They don't need to G themselves up to do their exercises. They see how it's related to their recovery. They see how it's related to the goals that they have, the specific goals that they have set that we have discussed with them, and they can see how this is helping them get there. So there's a relevance related to that, and that's completing the package for the patient in terms of presenting that to them, having them understand that and understand how their contribution is really important within a treatment plan as well. So there's definitely the communication piece.
Yeah, right.
I think the graduates are really good on knowledge. They know a lot of stuff. The communication of that could use help, and the implementation of that too. I don't think, and I've been in the place before coming out of uni and not feeling like I have enough of a palpatory sense. And I think that's where things are falling over. It's my understanding is it goes back to lack of contact hours. We had a lot more contact hours than they do now, and especially contact hours as in being at the university, doing practical courses, practicing on each other, having lunchtime sessions, those kind of things. So I think they're the two key areas that I see that are holes that I've tried to fill. you know, there's been a lot of focus on pain education, which is great for understanding for the patient, but what do they actually do about it? Like, because most of them just want to know what to do. We love the background stuff, but what does the patient really need to know?
That stuff's for us. You know, that's great for us to understand that. And if we can take that pain education and explain it in a very lay way that the patient can understand, then that becomes relevant to the patient, and that's fine. But that's really the we geek out on that stuff, you know. But the patient ultimately wants to feel better. They want the outcome. You know, what's the outcome for me? Thank you for explaining that to me, but I want to know how I'm going to feel once I've walked out of the clinic or once I've completed this treatment plan. And I think that's something that's been missing from graduates, is they're not being taught to focus on the outcome. I think that goes back to the issue we discussed with anxiety, right? Is that when you focus on the things that make you feel better as a practitioner, like understanding pain and understanding mechanisms, understanding physiology, and then you're still a bit anxious about it, well, it's because the patient doesn't care about that. But if you start focusing outwards towards the patient, and you know the patient cares about the outcome, and you start telling them, well, look, you're going to feel better when you play your sport. You're going to feel better when you take your kids in and out of the car. You're going to feel better when you pick up your kids. You know, when you pick them up, just pick them up. You'll be able to pick up your kids. You'll feel better when you can go for a walk for more than 20 minutes without pain. You know, when you tell them about these outcomes, that's what's going to create that aha moment for the patient. You go, yes, I want you to help me with that, and so I'm going to come back and see you.
Absolutely. And they also then really get that you've listened to them, because they're not like every other patient. They want to know that they're going to get those outcomes, and you've actually heard what they had to say. And most practitioners don't actually hear that and don't actually repeat that back to them and don't work as their advocate to get them to that place.
Yeah, so that's really important when I teach the students about a prognosis, you know, and they'll write, yes, you know, the prognosis, and I'll give what the tissue will be like with the prognosis. I said, no, the prognosis is not what the tissue will be like. The prognosis is what the patient will feel like. That's the prognosis. You know, the prognosis should be you'll be able to sit for more than half an hour without pain. That's what the patient wants to know. You know, they don't. The tissue stuff is for you. You know, and so that's really important. And I hope that people who are listening, who might be listening to the podcast, who are in charge of education, can maybe address that. I've tried to address it in my course, and by the sounds of it, I've talked to you and I've talked to a couple of other practitioners who run larger clinics and have graduates who go through their clinics. They've had to implement that into their training. You know, they've had to do that because it's a you can't sell otherwise, because you can't then, you know, book. You can't ask a patient to book in for more sessions on physiology alone. You've got to show them how you're going to make them feel. And so absolutely. Practitioners who are experienced, they know this and they're educating the practitioners on this. So I hope that more of that happens. And I guess then the follow-up to that is where do you see osteopathy in the future? Like, what's the next? What do you think we have to look forward to? Like, what are you really excited about? I guess for the next 10 years of osteopathy.
I think the more growth that we get out of osteopathy, it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I hope that we get a bit of a big pendulum swing actually back. I don't think it's realistic, but I'd love to see a pendulum swing back to first principles osteopathy and back to osteopathy being about health and wellness of the organism, the body as a unit system where it's body, mind and spirit, as opposed to where pain management. I would love to see the more holistic approach that I was attracted to osteopathy for come back as a focus in our universities and come back as a focus for these future osteopaths who are actually going to steer osteopathy into the future.
Why do you think we lost that? What happened?
I think that from what I see, we have tried to fit under the wing of medicine and be very accepted to be, I think we, there's benefits to registration, national registration. There are drawbacks to national registration. I think we have prostituted osteopathy to get the recognition from certain bodies, to get certain funding, to get certain acknowledgement. And I think we've lost the foundations of osteopathy along the way. And that saddens me deeply because...
Did you think we had to do that though? Like, did that have to happen? Did that have, like, no one stuck a gun to our head and said, you've got to drop X, Y, Z. I think we willfully went along with this.
Yes.
Whether it's the association, whether it's the regulator, whether it's, I don't see that there was a big fuss made when the process was happening. And look, there's two programs down in Melbourne, and I'm going to ask you another question on that in a minute. But the point I want to make, there's two programs down in Melbourne that are pumping out graduates, and it's got to be, they'll be bringing out about 100 graduates a year, at least. And then there's another one at Southern Cross University up in northern New South Wales. That's and the Gold Coast, and I think that program now is becoming exclusively on the Gold Coast. So that's providing osteopaths for Queensland. And there's a new course now over in Western Australia, which is a great thing. But especially in Melbourne, we've seen a huge explosion of osteopathy in Melbourne. Osteopaths are all over aged care, they're all over the sports clubs, they're all over the AFL, they're all over occupational health, and they're just moving into different fields. And that's great, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's been a huge explosion there, and somebody must have seen this decline in quality of osteopathy. And I haven't heard anything about it. Like, I haven't heard it from... And if I did, there were people that were saying things, it wasn't public, and it never made it to the point where, I guess maybe the association got a hold of it and wrote a letter in support of osteopathic principles. It's never been something that's been advocated for publicly. And I've had this conversation with, with Matt Cooper, the president of Osteopathy Australia. And the question I asked him was, when you guys go to these universities, do you just pat them on the back and say, great work? Or do you actually sit down and say, hey, we're going to take these graduates because they're osteopaths and we're going to look after them, but we're not happy with the quality that you're delivering here. Are you giving them that message? And I guess his answer was that, we have conversations, and I'm not sure what is being said to the universities, and I don't know what power that the association has. The profession, I talk about the association because ultimately they're the ones that are representing us, the professionals. We can't talk about the regulator. The regulator protects the public, against, I guess not against, but protects the public. And so who's saying this? And when I talk to people like you, Jess, you tell me this on the podcast, and I talk to other people, and I've talked to a lot of experienced practitioners, and they all say the same thing. I'd love for osteopathy to retain its uniqueness, its identity, its hands-on approach. It's a point of difference with the other main professions that deal with musculoskeletal. We have a hands-on approach. We have these principles and these philosophies that have really helped us through the ages and continue to be helping us. So we need to hold on to that. It's a point of difference, and that makes it easier to sell when you have a point of difference. And so that's my, excuse me, I guess that's my input, is that I'm not hearing a lot of, people who are, crying out saying, hold on a sec, what are we doing here? And have you felt the same way, or do you feel like you're in a vacuum?
In some ways, I think it's a risky conversation to have in some groups, and I think there has been more conversation since some rumbling, around how the regulatory body handled the COVID situation. I think that's brought a bit more out into the open. And it's been a little bit divisive in that. And so I don't think that encourages open discussion about certain parts of osteopathy and the differences between osteopaths and different groups and different preferences. I wonder if we've had a bit of a frog in the pot and the water's been turned up gradually. And all of a sudden we're here and go, what happened to osteopathy? Like, what actually happened? And I think as I've gone more into and delved more into first principles osteopathy and brought that back into my practice, that's when I've kind of looked around and gone, oh, okay, so where is this represented in osteopathy? We're not actually allowed to say much about this as osteopaths, because it's not about pain, just generalizing. But I think there's just so much depth in osteopathy that gets missed, and I feel for those osteopaths who are coming out of uni who actually don't see that ever, and they may not see it ever in their career, the full depth of what osteopathy can be. And that's not for every osteo to, for them all to embrace. And some of them, don't have an interest in that area and it doesn't resonate with them. But just to have the exposure to that, like I had the exposure to visceral manipulation, cranial, biodynamics, all those kind of things that now my understanding is are not part of the curriculum, especially in the southern courses. I believe there's still some indirect left at up here at the Gold Coast. But it's disappointing that exposure is not there, at least to introduce the students to what's possible and link it back to those principles.
Yeah, look, I agree with you, and I think there needs to be exposure to those things. Playing devil's advocate, even if there's no exposure to those things, osteopathic principles should be taught as the foundation of osteopathy, right? And you can choose. I mean, I can go and do lots of courses in cranial. I can go and work with George Stillian and do his stuff. I can go and work like you did. I can go and explore, and they're all tools in my toolkit. But if I speak to a biodynamics practitioner who will talk about osteopathy, and then I go and speak to a very direct practitioner who also is trained in osteopathy, they'll agree on the same principles, because their principles kind of align. And what I found as well is that, and you mentioned this earlier, is that, you spent the first few years of your practice doing lots of HVLA and direct myofascial work and so forth, and then things kind of progress for you. And I've been exposed to some really good direct practitioners in my career who have gone on to become very, very good indirect practitioners. And my assertion is, to be a really good indirect practitioner, you first have to be a very good direct practitioner, because you build the palpatory skills to be able to kind of layer that on top. If you can't feel the engagement of a facet joint at its point that it's ready to be manipulated, trying to find the layers of tissue in the biodynamic sphere is going to be very, very difficult for you.
Yeah.
And so go away and just do the stuff, do the motion palpation on things that you can grasp, and build your skill set on top of that. And I guess, like I said to you, the best indirect practitioners have been, in my opinion, the best direct practitioners. And underpinning all that is their philosophy and their education. So at the very least, if we can give the students the egg that we received that had osteopathy inside it, and crack it open for them, and have that be the thing that sustains them, they can go away and do whatever course they want and build whatever skill set they like. And they can always fall back on that, and it'll always be there for them. And I guess the thing that I'm looking for is to pass that on as a legacy, you know. And you seem like you're in agreement with that you want to pass that on too. And you've tried to do that with the people that have worked with you. And I asked you the questions, what would you like? I asked you the question, and the question was, you know, what are the things you're happy about in terms of what are the things you're, I guess, looking forward to in osteopathy in the next 10 years? And you said that you'd like for those principles to be, I guess, retained and taught and passed on to the next generation. I don't know if we're heading that way. I really don't. I don't see that there's a big push in that, or that the profession's getting together and saying, hey, we need to do something about this. And you're right, it is a bit of a frog in water that's slowly going up in temperature. And right now we're burning and we've realized it, and it might be a bit too late. So this leads me on to my next question. I want to take you back a little bit. And I want to ask you about Ray Myers. And you mentioned Ray Myers earlier. Some people that I've talked to that have had experience in that RMIT program said that there was a distinct difference between the period pre-Ray Myers and post-Ray Myers in terms of what was delivered in terms of osteopathic principles. Would you agree with those statements?
Oh, that would be difficult for me to be specific on that clear delineation between pre and post, because I don't have I don't have a clear understanding of how it has been since I haven't been there, which was a few years before Ray passed on. So it's a difficult one. What I generally see coming out of, in terms of graduates coming out of there, is that yes, absolutely, it's been completely watered down in its osteopathic philosophy coming through there. So Vic Uni, similar, yeah, but I get more out of University of Southern Cross from Gold Coast from those graduates, in terms of the integration of those principles. So I think Paul's done a really great job there, and his team obviously
Paul
as
has
well.
done,
In
Paul has done a good
reiterating
job there.
that, you know, it's just that it's the constant laying down and constantly relating back to those principles. This is the context. This is why we're doing it. This is how we're doing it, and this is why. And that's why I love the teaching of the Braille Institute. That's why I love George's teaching as well, because it everything comes back to osteopathic principles. Everything comes back to the why. And there's every technique, every diagnostic approach is always in the context of what and how and why. So there's background, there's context to it.
Yeah, and that leads you to the who, and that's you as an osteopath, right? Once you understand the what, which is the anatomy, the physiology, and the processes, and then the why, which is the structure and function, the how, which is the structure and function, the why, which is homeostasis and regulation and healing, and then the who, which is the osteopath. And that was the topic of the last webinar that I did, that the principles are really the what, the how, the why, and the who of medicine.
Yeah.
And if you understand all that, it all makes sense. And then off you go. I think that's a good place to end our conversation tonight. Before I let you go, where can people reach you, Jess?
Yeah, thank you. So drjessharvey.com is a website that covers both, has links to Head to Toe Health, which is my clinical side, and also the Burnout Recovery Program, so you can find it all through there. Also, Facebook is main social channel that I use, so you can find us at Jess Harvey, at Head to Toe Health with the number 2, or at the Burnout Recovery Program.
All right. I'll link to drjessharvey.com in the show notes, and people can reach out to you there and get a hold of you. And as I understand, you're very approachable and happy to help people that are looking to, get the help that you can offer. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Please reach out to Jess, guys, if you need anything that she can help you with. Jess, it's been an absolute pleasure. Stay on the line with me. I want to ask you a couple of questions for my students, but for everybody else, thank you for joining this episode, and I will catch you on the next episode. Jess, thank you, and stay on the line, hold the line.